Works meeting to order. Councilperson McGuire, Councilperson, actually President, I don't want to demote him here, Ray O'Connell and myself. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Public Works. Craig, get going.
Does this work? Yes. For those of you, let me just kind of start off. I've talked to several of you when I came in. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Koplish. I was superintendent of wastewater treatment with the city for 15 years and manager of water resources for another 15 years. My family, most of my family lives in Allentown, so does my wife's. I say that to you only in the sense that basically in addition to a professional interest, I have a very real interest because I live here in Allentown. So what goes on environmentally is a concern to me. And the interest of basically the meeting is to address blending. But before I get to blending, I wanted to kind of speak to, I received a copy, I'm considered environmentalist because I'm on some lists, so I got a copy of the invitation to attend, which was put out. And I think before I begin, I wanted to kind of address misinformation or inaccuracies addressed in the flyers. And if I could, everybody can hear me? I'm good? And hopefully I don't mess this up. Okay, this I want to get straight immediately, absolutely and unequivocally. Blending will not result in discharge of raw sewage into the Lehigh River. Blending will in no way affect the drinking water within the Little Lehigh or the Little Lehigh watersheds. Blending will not impact recreational activities on the Lehigh River. Blending will, however, it's an efficient use of rate. In the flyer it says tax dollars, but they're actually rate dollars to address the EPA administrative order. So just so that we're clear, what's stated in the flyer is inaccurate to the degree that I've expressed it there. I'd also like to mention, several people have asked me about how this affects the industrial pretreatment plant on Route 100. Blending is in no way connected with the industrial pretreatment plant. It only has to do with the city of Allentown's Climbs Island treatment plant. So if I could go on to what blending is. The question is, what is blending? Everybody here is blending. Blending is, it's an in-plant alternative for treating wet weather, high volume sewage flows that result in the discharge into the receiving stream, that being the Lehigh River, that complies with permit conditions. You can see that I underlined 4 words or phrases in the definition. I'd like to, if I could, go through those 4 things to kind of give you a background or educate you on really what blending amounts to. The first one, if we could look at how permits are determined. Notice whether you're a municipal or an industrial discharger, you need to have a permit. Permits are developed under what they call the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, which we know as NPDES permit. What actually happens is you're looking at on the graphic there a picture of Climbs Island, which is a structure in the middle. The kind of snake-like thing to the right side is the Lehigh River. What DEP does is they have a sophisticated model, and they look at the designated uses of the river. Is it warm water fishing, cold water fishing, recreation? Is it going to be a drinking water source? They determine what that reach of the river is going to be used for. Then they look at things like the pollutants of concern. What concerns are there? Is there high phosphorus? Is there high zinc? What's in the river that could potentially be a concern to the ecosystem? They look at the background concentrations. They consider the water chemistry, things like pH, things like hardness. So they want to know how things, when there's an effluent discharge, how it's going to react with the river itself. They also look at mixing, and one of the critical variables they look at is what's known in the industry as Q710. What Q710 is, DEP model looks at a 10-year period. They look at the 7-day low flow on the river, meaning that they're looking and protecting the ecosystems. They're looking at the worst case scenario. In other words, they're looking at a 10-year time frame when the river was at its absolute lowest. To be conservative, though, on the other side, they look at where you see Allentown 40 MGD, million gallons per day, Allentown discharge. Your permit is based on you discharging your maximum allowable volume. So they appreciate, in terms of being conservative, they're looking at protecting the ecosystem by assuming low flow conditions Your permit is based on you discharging your maximum discharge. So let's look at one pollutant for Allentown. What I've looked at here, sounds kind of funny, it's called carbonaceous biochemical oxygen demand, abbreviated CBOD. Sounds like a weird kind of thing, and I don't know how many of you are used to some of these concepts. But really what that is, it's probably the best indicator of how well the biological treatment processes work within the treatment plant. It's an indicator of, again, of how biological processes work. What the permit will contain is, if you look at that chart, in other words, the instantaneous maximum that Allentown can discharge with CBOD is 30 milligrams per liter. In a water-based system, milligrams per liter is equal to parts per million. So on a daily basis, the most that can go out is 40 milligrams per liter. Weekly, it's 30 milligrams per liter. Monthly, the average is 20 milligrams per liter. So that's what's in Allentown's permit. So let's get an idea kind of where we're at. Now you see on this chart, I've added a fourth line. The red line there, it says leased monthly performance standards. When the city was involved with leasing the treatment plant, the water and sewage plant, there was a lot of concern expressed at the public meeting saying, we've got a problem here, or maybe not a problem, a concern, because Allentown has won several awards for the treatment plant. Drinking water quality has been excellent. They said, we don't want to have, if the lease goes through, we want to make sure that the quality of the water, the quality of the effluent are maintained. So for those of you that were involved with the leasing proposition, we established what we called Allentown standards. The red line basically says to whoever wins the lease, which happened to be LCA, it says you not only have to comply with permit standards, you have to comply with a more restrictive standard. The orange dots that you see there represent monthly averages of CBOD over the last 3 years. So appreciate what you're looking at here. That represents 1,000 data points. So that basically that's 1,000 days that you're looking at. And if you look at that in terms of the performance, you can appreciate that the average effluent CBOD is somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 7 milligrams per liter. So the performance is excellent. So if you get an idea in terms of the treatment plant performing, it's performing excellently. That will be important as I get to a further slide. The next thing I want to talk about, the next phrase is called in plant. Okay, when I say in plant, this is a process that's going to be installed at Pons Island. Okay, the city's wastewater treatment plant can effectively treat up to 87 million gallons of water. So that basically it's permitted for 40, but during the day sometimes you treat 50, at midnight you're treating only 12, 15. It varies. The plant can treat effectively 87 million gallons. If the flow coming into the plant exceeds 87 million, there's an excess flow that can go out and outfall. It's termed outfall 003, and it's prior to the entrance to the plant. The administrative order that Allentown is working under, basically EPA is saying to Allentown, we don't want you to use outfall 003. We don't want any sewage going out of that. So there's basically two options. You either look at blending or you look at installing equalization tanks. Tim Bradley will give you a better breakdown of how those work, the benefits of them, and how they generally work. But for now, the point that I'm making and relating back to my definition is blending involves an in-plant treatment process. The next thing we want to look at is excess. What does that mean? I used the definition, wet weather flows. What does that really amount to? This is one of them. This is basically Irene. When Irene comes, the city has to, all the sewage that's coming in, and everybody knows there's inflow and infiltration, extraneous flows gets into the sewer system, the city has to deal with it. So that's where the headline that accompanied Irene. It basically, one of the worst storms ever, the most rainfall we had ever gotten. That's what the headline looks like. Here's what the Lehigh River looks like. That's a picture taken down from the Hamlin Bridge, looking down the Lehigh. Over to the right-hand side there, where you see there's a couple of structures and some lights, that's the Kleins Island sewage treatment plant. The flow at that point in time is approximately 15,000 CFS, that's cubic feet per second. The Q710 that I talked about earlier, where we're trying to protect the ecosystem, is 350. During storms like this, the river flow is 40 times greater than Q710. Now let's take a look at, the issue becomes, well, these things happen, how often do they happen? What's the history of overflow? How often are these occurring? And what kind of a problem do we have? I don't know if you can see this. Hopefully, there will be, I think on the thing, you'll be able to see it later. I'm sorry if you can't. I don't know if there's any way to beef it up. Let me just... Well, let me just take my word for it, and you can look at it online. I'm an honest guy. On the left-hand column is basically the date of when there was the outfall 003 was used. The second column gives you an idea of what happened. You go over to the, who's ever controlling that, if you can move it over to the right. The next column there shows you the total volume that went out, outfall 003. And the fourth column over, if we can move it over one more column, shows you how much actually went through the treatment plant. So if who's ever controlling that, Mike, if you could go to Irene, keep it on, if you can go to Irene, and everybody sees where Irene is, 828, and then above it is Lee, 9697, 2011. Can you go over to the right and highlight those two columns? Okay, we see Lee. Can you see Lee and Irene, and then the flows? We get that? No? Okay, so that at the point in time which Irene is coming in, we're treating 84 million gallons through the plant. When Lee comes a week and a half later, we're treating 86 million gallons and 77 million gallons on successive days. What's going out 003, which we have to deal with, that's basically where blending comes in. In one case, it's 4.6 million gallons. In another one, it's 2.04. I want to give you an idea of the magnitude, so that basically during these extremely heavy storms, 70 to 80 million gallons are going through the plant, getting total treatment. For blending, we've got to deal with the other 2 to 4 million gallons, which previously had gone out outfall 003, which EPA is saying you can no longer do. Now, if I could take you over to the next, I guess the next slide. If you look at the slide here where it says treated plant CBOD, if you can look down that column, if you can look at the numbers 375, 375, 6579, when we're treating 70 to 80 million gallons of sewage, the treatment that the sewage is getting is essentially the same as what it is during normal conditions. So we're treating 70 to 80 million gallons. The BOD is basically the same. You look at Irene, the numbers are 5 and 7. What is that kind of, let me take you back to another slide. Okay, wait, let me go back one. This is the slide that I showed you previously. Again, the orange line is showing you the performance, which is basically represents daily treatment under normal conditions. The little diamonds, the blue diamonds, represent, they're equally spaced, but they represent the 12 overflows that we had in the last 11 years. When you look at that chart, we used outfall 003 in the last 11 years 12 times. So approximately once per year, we have an outfall out of 003. And when we do, the effluent quality is excellent. That's just factual. It is what it is. So we get ahead now to the last part that I'm talking about is compliance, before I turn it over to Tim Bradley. As environmentalists, and I know several of you that I talked to you when you came in, are very conscientious. You realize that in addition to the concentrations being low, which I've expressed to you, the total pounds of pollutant discharged to the Lehigh River must be within permit limits. Because the total leaving the plant is greater than 40 million. So that if you remember that when I talked to you earlier, The model is assuming you're discharging 40 million. Now we're going to be going out with 70 million. We know that most of it, 70, 80 million, has received full treatment. Blending is a treatment alternative designed to fully comply with all permit conditions. So hopefully, I've talked kind of quick. There'll be a Q&A after this. And I'd like to turn it over to Tim Bradley. Tim Bradley is a professional engineer. He's registered in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. He's got 35 years of experience. He's also vice president of Kleinfelder Engineers. Tim has basically been involved with the design of 2 blending systems. He's also participated in the development, projects which have included blending. I say that to you not just to express Tim's background, but to say blending is not a new technology. It's not as though it hasn't been used. So with that, hopefully I'm a tough act to follow.
Thank you, Dan. Before I grab a microphone, can everyone hear me? I don't have the loudest voice, but can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Use the mic? Okay. I'll use this. How's that sound?
Better.
All right, excellent. Okay, so I want to first just emphasize a couple of key points that Dan mentioned. So every wastewater treatment plant in the United States is regulated through the NPDES program, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program, and the issuance of NPDES permits. This pointer is in NPDES permits. The NPDES permits are established as the fundamental basis to protect water quality. The NPDES program was part of the Federal Clean Water Act implemented in the early 70s to protect water quality. NPDES permits stipulate the specific effluent limits required for water quality protection for each specific plant and its discharge location, as Dan mentioned. The performance data of the plant is submitted to the Pennsylvania DEP on a monthly basis to verify that the appropriate limits are being met on a monthly basis. The takeaway message here is that NPDES permit compliance equals water quality protection. Water quality protection is achieved when you achieve compliance with your NPDES permit limits. So at the Kleins Island plant, these are your key effluent limitations. The key parameters are in the left column. Dan mentioned CBOD. There's also TSS, total suspended solids, NH3, which is ammonia nitrogen, and fecal coliform. They are the key parameters. Now, every wastewater treatment plant in the country has limits for CBOD, TSS, and fecal coliform. Not all plants have effluent limits for ammonia nitrogen. Kleins Island plant does. There's probably at least half the plants in the U.S. do have ammonia limits like the Kleins Island. Kleins Island plant has them because they're needed to protect the water quality of the Lehigh River specifically. The Kleins Island plant was designed to achieve these limits, and these limits exist on several bases. On a monthly average basis, a maximum weekly basis, and an instantaneous maximum. So you can see there are different values for each of those conditions, whether it's a monthly average, a maximum weekly, or an instantaneous maximum. Again, the Kleins Island plant was designed to achieve those effluent limitations. And this is a flow diagram representing the fundamental design of the Kleins Island plant. So flow comes in from the collection system, first undergoes preliminary treatment, then primary treatment, followed by biological treatment, disinfection, and discharge to the Lehigh River. We're just quickly regarding each of those steps. Preliminary treatment removes the debris and coarse heavy solids in the wastewater that, if they weren't removed, could damage or produce excessive wear on the downstream processes and equipment. Primary treatment removes about 50% of the total suspended solids, 30% of the CBOD. Biological treatment removes the remainder of the TSS and BOD that's required for removal to comply with the permit, as well as all of the ammonia nitrogen. This is a step that removes ammonia nitrogen. And disinfection treatment deals with the fecal coliform effluent limit that we saw in the previous slide. Collectively, those processes in sequence allow compliance with the effluent limitations, again, on a monthly average, maximum weekly, instantaneous maximum basis. As Dan had mentioned, the Klein Island plant has a permitted capacity of 40 MGD. So it's permitted to discharge on an average basis. At the present time, and for a long time actually, your average flow is actually about 30 MGD most of the time. As Dan had mentioned, the Klein Island plant can process a peak flow up to about 87 MGD. During infrequent severe wet weather events, the flow can exceed 87 MGD, as Dan mentioned. That occurs maybe once a year on average. And when that happens, the flow is in excess of 87 MGD. It's discharged out from the system prior to any form of treatment through outfall 003, which discharges to the Little Lehigh Creek. That is the subject of the AO that Dan mentioned, where that discharge needs to be eliminated as a result of the administrative order, which is where blending comes in. And first, what are the benefits of blending, or what are the objectives of blending? The objectives of blending are to enable the Klein Island plant to treat flows in excess of 87 MGD, and to comply with all of those effluent limits that we saw previously in the table. Fecal coliform, BOD, TSS, ammonia, all of those limits on a monthly average, max weekly, max instantaneous basis, comply with each of those limits, to comply with the administrative order, and to do that, it significantly reduced cost in comparison to flow equalization, which I'll show what that is in another slide, but fundamentally, flow equalization is a bunch of large tanks that will store that excess flow that's greater than the 87 MGD, store it temporarily, and release it back into the system for treatment as flows subside below 87 MGD. That's what flow equalization is. This flow diagram depicts what happens with blending. So again, all flow comes into the system, or is conveyed by the system, but now outfall 003 is closed, essentially. I put that X through it. All the flow receives preliminary treatment, all the flow receives primary treatment, but then around biological treatment, we're going to divert just that flow that exceeds 87 MGD around the biological treatment step, or it's then recombined with disinfection treatment. So 100% of the flow is fully disinfected prior to discharge to the Lehigh River. Under that scenario, again, the plant complies with all of the effluent limitations on a monthly average, max weekly, and instantaneous maximum basis. As I indicated before, when you comply with all those limits, it equals water quality protection. So blending enables the plant to continue achieving the required level of water quality protection mandated through the effluent limitations that have been established for the plant. So that's what blending does. And when you do that, let me back up for 1 second. So under the flow equalization alternative, rather than that line around biological treatment, all that excess flow would continue out. The line is now shown as going to outfall 003, and would go to some very large flow equalization tanks for storage. That's what flow equalization essentially is. But the benefits of blending are the following. Significant cost savings of approximately $37 million in comparison to flow equalization. That's a lot of dollars. That's a lot of reduced rate impacts. And again, there's no impact on permanent compliance through the blending approach as compared to flow equalization. No impact on effluent compliance, again, means no impact on water quality. It means water quality protection. And as well, there are enhanced operational benefits by blending. Rather than having these big tanks that just sit there and maybe they're used once a year, the tankage that's constructed for blending provides a benefit year-round, and that provides additional redundancy, resiliency, enhanced maintainability by providing surplus tankage in the treatment train that can be used when other existing tanks need to be maintained, taken out of service temporarily. There are no odor generation concerns with blending, as there is with flow equalization. And also, very significantly, it conserves land for future use. There's a very limited amount of land currently available at the Kleins Island site, which you'll see. The blending facilities require substantially more land to implement than blending. As a result, there would be much less land available for future use. Why might there be a need for things in the future? Well, additional parameters could be regulated in the future, requiring some form of additional treatment, requiring additional land for the treatment technologies. There would be much more land preserved for that potential future scenario through blending than flow equalization. And to demonstrate that, this figure depicts the size of the tanks that would be needed for blending. And to put things in perspective, what would be required here is a total storage volume of approximately 18 million gallons. 18 million gallons, to store that, you need 3 acres of tanks that are 20 feet deep, essentially. That's a huge, volume of tanks, a huge expense. Picture all that concrete, 3 acres, 20 feet deep. It's a massive structure. These little blue blocks that we see that I can't get to on this pointer because this TV sucks in this thing. These very small blocks are what's needed for the blending facilities. Basically some additional primary satellite tanks, these small rectangular blocks. And just some very small tanks, round tanks. So basically we're preserving a whole lot of additional space for future use. Can't predict exactly what that be, but you can certainly count that at some future date there'll be some additional parameter that gets regulated for which you'll need to construct some new treatment system. You'll need land to do that. So in summary, we believe there are a tremendous amount of benefits for flow equalization basin. First and foremost, blending. First and foremost, it achieves water quality protection, compliance with all of the effluent limitations currently in effect, does so at significantly reduced cost, providing additional operational benefit to the plant on an ongoing basis. And there's really no benefit to be gained by flow equalization other than additional costs and additional rate impacts to the citizens. So with that, Dan and I are happy to take any questions that you might have.
Yeah, we're gonna open it up to the public. Again, 3 minutes is the maximum. We got a lot of people here. We don't have a lot of time, but we're gonna try and get through all these questions. They'll come up, address the questions, and then you guys can answer them. Dennis, you ready to go?
My question is, the way historical it is, LCA is under order because of inflow of problems coming down the line of water, that they were supposed to have a holding tank in order to hold the water. Is this blending operation a replacement of that system?
The blending is strictly for Kleins Island. It has absolutely nothing to do with LCA or the pretreatment plant. It's an in-plant structure to prevent overflows out of 003. It is only directed to Kleins Island.
But the holding tanks for LCA is a
Dennis, let's get to the microphone and
But the holding tanks for LCA were designed to lower the water flow that comes from western.
I believe, and I can't speak for LCA, but the concept is the tanks that they put in.
Can you use the microphone, please, so this can get recorded?
No, this one.
And I don't want to speak totally for LCA, but they put in a flow equalization tank at the county pretreatment plant, which basically serves similar to what Tim had talked. That is used during high flow conditions. It is not associated with blending. It does minimize flows that come down the line that are eventually treated at Kleins Island. They use it in the fashion that Tim described, where during a heavy storm, I think it's a 3 million gallon tank, it's filled up and then slowly released over time. But it is not in any way associated with blending at Kleins Island.
Any other Then the other question is that if you're the total capacity is, you said 40, as far as giving out allocation, okay? Will this allow increased allocation?
No, this in no way affects allocation. Everybody who is discharging to the plant, which is like South Whitehall, Copley Whitehall Sewer Authority, Allentown, LCA, and Western Lehigh suburbs, they have contractual amounts to basically total up to 40 MGD. Blending won't affect that whatsoever. Blending is designed to treat 40 million gallons and the extraneous flow associated with that 40 million gallons. Nobody's allocation is increasing as a function of blending.
Then my last question I would have is, if the water is not coming down from Western Lehigh County, where is the water coming from to have this 70 or so?
Well, it's coming from everybody. I mean, when I say I think it's clearly some comes from Lehigh County Authority, some comes from Allentown, some comes from South Whitehall Township, some comes from Emmaus. Everybody's system has a degree of leakage. They all contribute to the extraneous flow that comes in. The cost for the blending system is distributed based on everybody's allocation. So that the costs for blending will be distributed based on everybody's allocation.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
When you come to the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
She needs no introduction.
Yes, I do. Jan Kine. Okay, I was born and raised in reared in Allentown, now live in Salisbury Township. Been concerned about water quality in Lehigh County for half my life, 45 years. That makes me 85. No, I don't ever think I'll see the rivers cleaned up. It took a long time to get the Lehigh River to reach quality, cleaning up the mine acid drainage, cleaning up and getting rid of the pollution. Okay, I can't help but think, compare Lehigh and Little Lehigh. Lehigh River is the mother river. I can't help but thinking what's happened to the Little Lehigh River. It's gone from a high quality cold water fishing stream to 4 years ago when they did a study. It now has gone to non-attaining recreational use because of the pollution in the Little Lehigh from sewage overflows. That means, translated, non-attaining recreational use means no human contact. That hasn't been brought out in the public. Now we're talking about blending. Well, blending is a violation of DEP and EPA regulations. They do not approve of blending, and rightfully so. In the 1970s, there was a little slogan, because they talked about this then. Dilution is not the solution to pollution. I'd like to keep that in mind. Gentlemen, and cost, this seems to be an end run about cost. I'd like to remind you that when all of you took the oath of office as an elected official, you swore to uphold the Constitution of Pennsylvania. And the Constitution of Pennsylvania contains the environmental clause that people have a right to clean air, pure water, and historic quote, can't remember the whole quote, my age. But you have sworn an oath to protect our streams. Do not allow this blending to take place. Do not appeal this order. I remind you, you have not taken an oath either to balance a budget. You have to pay for the mistakes that were made. And LCA should be made to pay for their own mistakes. Thank you.
The only comment, I appreciate Jan. I've known Jan for 40 years, and she'll tell you that I'm generally an environmentalist. You know,
Don't put words in my mouth.
I think that basically the city's perspective on this, and as Tim has pointed out, is basically the city intends to fully comply with the administrative order. The issue at hand is basically that the city is basically saying that as we explained during the design, typically engineers or owners are not told how to achieve whatever their permit limits are. Allentown is basically saying, we are going to fully commit and basically totally comply with the administrative order. We would like to do it because there is an obligation to the ratepayers in a very cost-effective way. So that basically there is no intent to circumvent our permit requirements or anything like that. We're just looking to do it in a cost-effective way. Appreciate in some of the issues that, the land thing, like Tim mentioned, things like pharmaceuticals are probably gonna have to get treated in years to come. We're gonna need the available land. There's also issues if you lead through, I've read more about it than I ever thought I would. Things where they have problems, think about these tanks. Things like now with mosquitoes, West Nile spires, Zika, that basically you're gonna have these huge tanks here every time it rains, unless you're gonna pay an additional $10 million to cover them, that they can slide back and forth like a stadium. They're gonna fill with water. You're gonna have to have in a routine, basically, you're gonna have to clean these tanks out every time it rains, not just when they're used. I mean, when they're used, it's an odor problem. But every time it rains, people don't want, they get concerns about having saucers filled with water. We're talking about 3 acres of tanks, basically with residual water that's gonna have to get removed. So appreciate when you do, there's some side benefits to it. I would also note to you, the fact that Janet mentioned that EPA is basically opposed to it. I would show you, and it's on the website, EPA, although they're opposed to it, here's basically, and this is on Allentown's website, basically a 3-day symposium that they sponsored explaining to engineers how to design blending systems, what to look for, what are the issues of concern. So it's not as though EPA is saying you're not allowing it. There is an issue here that this region is opposed to it.
And let me just add as well that what's being proposed here is to improve the water quality of the Lehigh River. At the present time, during those rare events, raw wastewater is being discharged into a little Lehigh Creek. We're proposing to bring that into the plant and to treat it, rather than have it continue to discharge to the little Lehigh Creek.
Yeah, come up to the podium and state your name and address, please.
Mike Siegel, I live in Lower McCountry Township. I've helped the city of Allentown sitting on the board, sewage leasing board. I have several issues with blending. One, blending is being used as a capacity issue for LCA and the Western Lehigh County signatories, and that's what I'm against. They're trying to use this as a way of trying to get around having to put in expensive tanks. And all I would like to see out of this is if you choose to go with blending, I want an absolute guarantee that there will be no more overflows in the Little Lehigh Creek throughout the whole entire interceptor. Because if you're allowing that blending to go through, there should be no reason those pipes should be surcharged and blowing the manhole covers off into the parkway. And if you can't achieve that through the blending operations, then I think not only the city will probably get fined, but LCA will be fined. And it's a violation of the administrative order. Blending will also allow the Western Lehigh municipalities to expand and continue their I call excessive land development issues without having to put in $35 million of a wasted tank. So again, my concern is if you're gonna go use blending, I would like to see, and I'm sure every trout fisherman would like to see, absolute assurances that there will never be an overflow in the main parallel interceptor line from Spring Creek all the way to the city of Allentown's treatment plant, because it's grossly unfair if we're gonna allow blending that those lines would be completely surcharged and overflowing. That's to me is a lack of complete maintenance, and we have to, as a whole, take responsibility for that. Thank you.
I just wanted to make 2 points. First, regarding the capacity issue, blending will not provide additional capacity for average flow. It's only intended to deal with peak flow. In order to increase the average flow capacity, we'd have to expand the one treatment process that we're diverting flow around temporarily by blending, and that is the biological treatment system. It would only be through expanding the biological treatment system could we expand the capacity of the Klein Island plant for additional growth. This is only for peak, short duration wet weather events. I also wanted to comment that blending and flow equalization will provide the same benefit in terms of reduction in SSOs upstream in the system, because the same amount of flow would get brought up into the Klein Island plant for either alternative. So one's not any better than the other in terms of reduction of SSOs up within the system.
Thank you. Ma'am, if you want to step up here, say your name and address, please, and then ask your question or make your comment.
Hi, I'm Julie Thomasis, 824 North Broad Street, Allentown, PA. Hi, everybody, haven't seen you in a long time. So this is kind of a yes or no question, because I don't understand this that well, and I'm hoping the scientist amongst you, Dave McGuire, might help me with this. What I understood, and you may have said this, I came in 2 minutes late, was that heavy storms, blended wastewater discharged into the Lehigh River by Allentown LCA will contain more illness-causing pathogens, parasites, and viruses that are discharged when the treatment plant is fully treating wastewater during non-heavy storm events. Is that true? Is that true?
That is not true. That is not true.
That is not
All flow will be fully disinfected as it is now.
So
for
there'll be
discharge.
nothing extra.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Hey, come up to the podium, please. You don't have to raise your hand. All you have to do is come up to the podium, say your name and address, and ask your question or make your statement.
Hello, my name is Marissa Altman, 701 Harrison Street. I'm on the EAC, but I'm speaking for myself, not on behalf of the EAC. So I have a question, since obviously the blending proposal removes about 50% of biological treatment during these overflow events. Since biological treatment removes TSS and ammonium nitrogen, if you're cutting that process, then we could potentially expect to see increases in those effluent levels. So even if they're within the allotted permitting guidelines, I'd still be interested to see the modeling for the TSS and NH3, since we can expect it then to be higher than it is in normal circumstances.
No, we can provide that. I mean, our objective is to comply with the limits, which is needed for water quality protection. We don't have to do better than that to achieve water quality protection.
I'd still be really interested to see the modeling projections of what those effluent levels would be, even if they're within the guidelines, just to see what the differences are between the current status.
But it would not be 50% going through biological treatment. It's about, well, it depends on the peak flow, but we're talking about 120 MGD. So it would be roughly, we'll call it 30 MGD going, not being biological treatment, or roughly 90.
Yeah.
It's not 50-50.
Okay, that's fine. I'm still just interested in what might potentially not be taken out through the biological or through the disinfection process at the
Look
end.
at the historical chart, which will be posted. You can
Right.
see to date, I mean, it's being designed for future years. Obviously, the design is going to be that flows will reach 120. If you look at the chart that I provided there, you can see that the worst case overflow for the last 11 years was, I think, 4.6 million gallons, as compared to the plant treated on that given day, 84 million.
Right. Right, but I mean, I'd be interested to see like an example of another system in another town, for example, where this is been implemented, like what their effluent levels have changed when they implement blending. So I'm gonna look up that information myself, but if you can provide it for the city, I'm sure that would be appreciated as well. Thank you.
I'm Bill Erden with Keystone Consulting Engineers. I'm here as myself with some knowledge base. I also recognize faces in the room, Dina, Janet, Mike, and the others that are concerned about the Little Lehigh. I think it's extremely important to distinguish between the two regulatory issues that are out there right now. There's some confusion. Little Lehigh has been mentioned several times. That's a whole separate issue that's being addressed by a corrective action plan through DEP. So this blending has nothing to do with Western Lehigh Interceptor. As to your concern, Mike, to say that the Little Lehigh is to be protected, There's a directive from DEP, which has resulted in a corrective action plan, that has to be done independently. Because it makes sense to plan as the whole region, the two things have merged together, but they're still separate and distinct. So even if blending goes in, it has nothing to do with what's happening in the Western Lehigh Interceptor. The onus is on the municipalities, and our firm represents two of them, as well as Lehigh County Authority, to address that issue, separate and distinct from blending. It has nothing to do with the plant has nothing to do with Western Lehigh. So there's been several mentions of Little Lehigh Creek. That's a completely separate issue. And I just want to draw that distinction, because I know a number of people here are concerned about the Little Lehigh. That's a whole separate issue from the conversation that's occurring tonight.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question, comment? Jan, up to
Yeah,
the podium,
you gotta
please.
come up, that's their rules, Jan.
Yep.
Hi, Dina Zofsky, Lower Mackenzie Township. I actually just have a clarifying question. It might be for Bill, and maybe Dan. So you just mentioned that it doesn't affect the Little Lehigh, but you said that outflow 003 is directly discharged into the Little
It
Lehigh.
goes into the Little Lehigh. If you look at the diagram, basically it goes into the reach of the Little Lehigh about 100 feet, 200 feet from the Big Lehigh.
But it's the Little Lehigh.
Yeah, it's a Little
Okay.
Lehigh.
All right, I just
Yeah,
wanted to
but
make
it
sure.
doesn't, in the area that people are concerned with, and knowing Jan for years, and basically up by Keck's Bridge and those areas, those are not outfalls up there. In other words, this is basically right next to Klein's Island.
Right, I understand, but it is a Little Lehigh, so it does affect the Little Lehigh. Okay, thanks.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, once you
No,
go,
not you,
once,
her.
Dan, is that your
We get
name?
one bite at the apple,
Yeah,
man.
is that your
Dina,
name, Dan?
Dina.
Yeah, is that once blending goes in, there will be no discharge to the Little Lehigh, that's the whole point.
But 003 is
Just
discharge point into the
currently
Little
will go
Lehigh.
into, currently if there's an outfall out of 003, it goes to a short section of the Little Lehigh and then hits the Big Lehigh. Once blending hopefully is in place, that will no longer occur, that's the whole point of blending.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else from the public? Sir?
Hi, I'm Luke Portiellis from Lower Country Township. I had a question. In the PowerPoint, it said that there would be no impact on water quality, but if we're going to be bypassing part of the treatment system, wouldn't there be some measurable impact?
I mean, quantitatively, the reality is that basically the impact on the Lehigh River is based on your permit. As I explained earlier, it's based on the worst case scenario with Q710 conditions. So that basically, as long as you are within your permit, there is no harm done to the ecosystem or water quality. So on a given day, in other words, your treatment level might be like, just take a number like a 5, tomorrow it's a 10, your limit is 15. It doesn't affect water quality until it hits 15. Does that make sense to you?
No, it does not. I think you might want to change the PowerPoint. It's pretty misleading, because if you're going to impact quality in any aspect, even below your effluent limitations, you're still impacting the water quality. To make the claim that you wouldn't be.
Yeah, it's like saying, is it 100%? No matter what, sewage is always partially treatment. In other words, your point of saying, is sewage ever going to go to drinking water? No. There's basically, even with a permit, permits for every facility result in partial treatment. Partial treatment is like 95% removal, 99% removal. It never goes to zero. So your point is, will it ever go to zero? No.
But when you compare that to flow equalization, would the quality coming out be the same?
I couldn't tell you that. If it's marginally, if anything, different. I'm not so sure that you would tell the difference.
I think that's pretty important to look into.
There would be some minor difference in pounds of discharge ultimately, DOD and TSS, minor discharge. From a water quality perspective, it would have no impact, because the regulators, DEP and EPA have already determined how many pounds can be discharged to not have an adverse effect on water
If
quality.
you want to look at it in another perspective, I showed you what the Little Lehigh looks like, which is basically during a high flow condition. During blending, the sewage is going to come out when the Lehigh is roaring. If you go to flow equalization, and that's put in over a period of, let's say, 10 days, 20 days, it is going to have more of an impact on the Lehigh River because it's going to be discharged when the flows are lower. So if your concern is relative to impact on the river, and from that sense, it's going to take you that many more days, does that make sense to you?
Yes and no, just because part of the treatment process would be bypassed. So I guess you'd have to look into.
Yeah, but it's, right, I understand what your point is, but I guess I'm saying to you, the goal is to meet permit requirements. And it will do that, and it will do it under worst case scenario situations where the river is flowing and the ecosystem is protected, and will do 7 to 10 conditions.
Dan Koreski, Allentown, just some elementary questions. We're talking about sewage treatment, and yet when you have a lot of rain, high rain, you're saying there's more sewage coming in.
Well, it becomes a way, as soon as, if it's extraneous flow, as soon as it hits the collection system, it's sewage. In other words, it's groundwater, most of it's groundwater. It's groundwater, and until it enters the sewage pipe, it then becomes sewage.
Right, but how does it get into the sewage pipe?
Basically, a lot of the lines, you have broken lines, there are a host of reasons.
So the reason we're having the problem is not by the rain itself, it's because the infrastructure is insufficient to seal out the rain.
That's correct.
So why don't we just fix the
I
infrastructure?
think there are efforts underway to fix the infrastructure. The problem is the reality of that occurring in terms of like the cost of doing it, the time of doing it. There are several efforts Bill had talked about earlier in terms of Western Lehigh Serve Partners. There's articles in the paper. I'm not totally familiar with what they're doing, but they're spending, I think the number was in the paper, is like $34 million.
Given my time consideration, I just want to hit a couple more points here. So the current way that this excess flow is being handled is it's just going into the public waterways untreated, and the blending helps makes it less contaminated. Makes it, you're saying it makes takes some of the contaminants out. So if we don't do anything, is that worse than blending?
Well, if you don't do anything, you're in violation of the administrative
As we
order.
are now. So
Yeah.
blending is an improvement to what the current situation
Absolutely.
is.
The point that I think her name is Deanne made is basically there's an outfall, excuse me, is that right now, if there's an extremely heavy rainstorm, there will be potential for an outfall out of 003.
So blending is an improvement to the current situation.
That's correct.
A better improvement would be to fix the infrastructure. An alternate to a better improvement would be to improve our treatment capacity.
Well, I wouldn't go to their treatment. We have sufficient treatment capacity. Bill had mentioned, or Tim had mentioned, the plant is currently treating 30 million gallons. It's got it permitted for 40. So there's no point immediately in increasing the capacity of the plant.
And then the other thing was to hold that water and treat it later when we didn't have the excess. But the problem with that is the storage tanks.
The storage tanks are expensive, they're odorous, and like I mentioned, there's a problem with mosquitoes. And the big issue on Tim's diagram is it's just a question of time before things, I use the term biological, it's just a question of time before more and more things become determined to have to be treated. I mean, that's just the nature of regulatory work. We want to reserve that space for future treatment. If we use it for those tanks, it's Klein's Island, it's an island, now it's a peninsula, but it's very limited space-wise. So we would like to preserve that space for the future.
Thank you.
Sir, step up.
Hi, my name is Al Worth. I live downstream in Bethlehem. I have just a couple of questions for clarification. First one is, could somebody explain why DEP and EPA don't want to do blending and do want to do full equalization?
To be truthful with you, Al, I'm not 100% sure. You know what I mean? I would like, I think we would like to.
I'll let you talk all you want, okay? And the second question is, I'm a little nervous about people accepting a bright line of meeting regulatory requirements as meaning quality. And I'm wondering, like, if 10 parts per million is twice as bad as 5 parts per million, and as long as we come in line, it doesn't turn from being just fine and okay into sort of horribly dangerous and toxic when we cross that bright line. So I'd like you to speak to what you think would be the best way to provide the best water quality we can
I think
for the people who live downstream, and imagine me being a fish, perhaps, and wondering whether I wanted 5 or 10
Let me speak
parts
to
per
you.
million.
Two issues. One is, I think we've done a job, and the fact that the point that I made to you earlier, being a downstream user, the issue for the lease is basically the standard that Allentown has set at 12 parts per million when I use BOD. There's similar things for ammonia, that basically we have set limits under the lease to say whoever got the lease, which happens to be LCA, you have to provide treatment much more restricted than what the permit is. So somebody like you that lives downstream enjoys that benefit.
And you have no idea why EPA.
Let me just comment on it. It depends on which region of EPA you're
Well,
talking
as
about.
I said, I just, you could explain.
Right,
the difference.
well, there's no good technical reason. It's, and it may be changing in the future. But if you go to a different state, like Region 2 of EPA, where I do a fair amount of work in New Jersey, blending is okay. So it depends on where you are. In those states, what they focus in on is not the.
So where should I live?
Well, wherever the treatment system is compliant with its effluent limit. In those other states, they don't mandate how you achieve compliance, only that you achieve compliance. So whether you use trickling filters, activated sludge, no form of biological treatment, whatever it's your choice as to what you use to achieve those effluent limits. In the state of Pennsylvania, they're saying you shall use biological treatment. We're designing a system to treat SSOs over in New Jersey, brand new, it's fully permitted. There's no biological treatment whatsoever. But we're meeting the effluent limits that are being established for protection of water quality. If that was done in Pennsylvania, they said you can't do that, you need biological treatment. Well, how do you start the biological treatment process instantaneously when a storm event comes in? It's not real amenable to that. So in New Jersey, the DEP, EPA Region 2 say as long as you protect water quality, you use whatever form of treatment you need in order to meet those effluent limitations. That makes sense. Why impose biological treatment when it's not necessary to meet the effluent limits being imposed?
Thank you. Anybody else from the public?
Yeah, my name is Scott Beaver, I'm from Makunji, and I'm a member of the LCA board. On the September letter from EPA in which they instructed LCA and the city that they would not like to be blended, it says, well, this is the EPA enforcement, the NPDES enforcement officer writing. He says regarding blending, PADEP explained at this meeting that according to state regulations, all flows from a sanitary system need to receive biological treatment, and therefore blending would be inappropriate. Do we have a letter? Has DEP actually provided any correspondence?
That's part of the issue, Scott, was from the time that I've been with the city for like 4 to 5 years, we've said to EPA and DEP, send us something, cite the regulations, send us basically where it says in the law and regulations blending is not allowed.
And they haven't? This is all we have?
That's what you have, that's what we're feeling. That's the first time we've gotten anything
Well, I'm sure
right.
you won't be able to go to a court and appeal this, will you?
Well, you can basically, once they put it in writing, you have to do it, the city's perspective is you have the right to challenge it.
No, but it's not in writing there from DEP, right? And they're the enforcement.
Well, that's illegal, you know what I'm saying? And the city's stance is basically on anything that's legal, we're not commenting. I mean, I'm telling you fundamentally, the city's perspective is that the city has the obligation to meet the administrative order. How we achieve it, Allentown believes it is basically up to us how we achieve it.
So what do you anticipate is gonna happen if the city says to DEP and?
I don't know, Scott. We're hopeful that they're basically going to say funding is acceptable.
Okay, I just don't understand why DEP hasn't issued something in writing.
Well,
this is just a second, this is a reference, I mean, Thursday, basically.
And I think that was the point we made earlier, is just that basically, we've been, from our perspective, they've been reluctant to say, here's the regulation.
Well, what exactly did they say?
Well, you're reading it, that's what they said.
At the meeting, what did they tell you? Why do they say that blending is inappropriate?
They think that everything has to receive biological processing. That's not, and I don't want to get into the legal issue, that's not what the regulation says. The regulation talks about second biological treatment means you reduce VOD by 65%. We're reducing it by like 95%. So the issue is a legal one.
Right,
And
you're
that's-
saying that the NPDS can not forbid that.
Yeah, and it's basically, it's a legal thing, what's in the regs and relative to what people, and I think that's common in everyday life. That's the nature of legal processes.
You know, I may have missed this. What's the total cost of all the holding tanks versus the total cost of blending to get to arrive at the $37 million difference?
As I remember, it was about, I don't know what you call exactly, roughly 30 versus 37 plus that. You know, 60,
Like,
I think 30 to 67.
Phase two is like 107 million, and it's 62 million without blending, or with blending.
The blending, that would cost $62 million to make the improvements, supplying dollars, and it'd be 100 and some million for the holding tank.
With the holding taxes compared to blending.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else from the public? Seeing nobody, thank you, gentlemen, but I will open it up to the members of council here as well as the Public Works Committee. Dr. McGuire?
Yes. Could you put back up one of your first three slides about 30%? I want to look at it. You're supposed to.
Okay. Which one do you want to see? One of mine, Dave, or one of Tim's?
Why don't you start with the first one?
I'm not sure what I'm doing.
You're not hitting the right thing now.
Something we don't want to do.
You can get
Here, somebody knows.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Next one.
There. Back, go back.
This is the downstream.
Yeah, that's right, where your pen, right above that blue line, that's the Hamlin Street.
Yeah. Okay, but the river's flowing this way.
That's correct.
You have data on the quality of the Little Lehigh River.
I don't have it, DEP would have it.
Is it accessible? I thought in a.
They would have it for their modeling, Dave, I don't have it.
All right, let's say it is, data is available. This is the before, this is the action, this is the after action. So, you know what, would this be considered drinking quality water?
If you treat it, even if you take the Little Lehigh, which is a higher quality water, you would have to.
No, it's too much. If I went down, could I just put my bucket in and drink this water and say I'm drinking wonderful, fresh flowing river water?
I would tell you no, Dave. There's gotta be bacteria in there, I don't know what is in there. Yeah, I would tell you not to drink it.
Okay, then, that, I'll call it non-drinkable or questionable water from a beautiful flowing river, comes down, and ordinarily we just keep going, but we have this plant here that adds more water. Right? That's what?
That's the
If that
Yeah,
water.
yeah.
Effluent, I try not to use those kind of words. Okay, I'm trying to make the point maybe because it's going to go too far. I think, Dr. Ward point is good. So ordinarily, when this plant is discharging at its regular capacity, that water, where it comes out of a pipe that goes into the Little Lehigh, is that water drinkable?
No, but I would tell you that it's comparable or in most cases better than the water quality of the Lehigh River.
Good. And then it comes down here, where DEP or whoever has been sampling. So there's a before and after of water quality. And given the flow of water this way, it goes downstream and is in that sense cleaner than if the plant were dumping its raw sewage in there.
Yeah.
Of course, the ideal thing would be if the Little Lehigh were the perfect, beautiful trout stream that it used to be or was, et cetera. It's, see,
But this is the big Lehigh, Dave.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get across is the point that several people have been pointing out, which is that, first of all, the normal discharge of the Allentown treatment plant is exceptionally good. It's way below what it has to be, or way above, right. Okay? And failing to do that, action with 80, 90, 100 million gallons of flow, it's raw sewage sufficient. So the treatment that they showed you on the little diagram still produces a water quality that meets, still well below the
Permit limits.
That's correct. Does not mean there is nothing in it.
Oh, that's correct. There's no safety.
If you take this, which you think is pure drinking water from pure mountain spring water obtained at, and it gives you 9 different things in different states. I wonder how, a little bit of this state, a little bit of that state, I don't know. But if you took this and evaporated it, you'd find stuff in there, like sodium chloride, that terrible chemical with salt and HCl. So anyhow, I think the point is that by the standards that the city and citizens have to operate by for water quality, these are propositions that will produce, on the average, a much better situation than what we presently have. Remember, the present one will discharge raw sewage, which is very bad for downstream people in Bethlehem, and so on. So this is dealing with that.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
hope that helps.
Anybody else from council? I'm sorry, were you done, Dr. Moore?
Yep.
Thank you. Anybody else from council? Seeing nobody else from council? Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you, guys. And I'm sure you'll probably get some questions.